Beneath the polished surface of the internet lies a place where morality rots, a place where human life is stripped of meaning and sold like merchandise. In that darkness, deeper than most dare to look, exists a name whispered in fear across twisted forums and encrypted message boards. They call him the doll maker. But he doesn't deal in porcelain or plastic. He deals in people, victims taken, transformed, and preserved into lifeless art for the pleasure of the rich, the hidden, the untouchable. This is the story of Brandon Keller, a former private investigator who followed a thread through the digital abyss, searching for a missing girl, only to uncover a nightmare more horrifying than anything he could have imagined. What he found wasn't just a trafficking ring. It was a gallery of human suffering, operated by those who see death not as an end, but as curation. This is a story soaked in silence, stitched with terror, and preserved in blood. Welcome to the doll maker. You'll never look at the dark web the same way again. Brandon Keller had always been a curious guy. Too curious, his ex-girlfriend once said. Curiosity about people, about obscure online rabbit holes, about things most folks would scroll past without a second thought. The kind of curiosity that didn't come with warning labels. He spent his days working IT support in a bland cubicle downtown, and his nights trawling the internet's darker corners, where conspiracy met corruption and unspeakable things whispered from behind encryption layers. Not for any noble reason. He wasn't a vigilante hacker or a would-be whistleblower. It was just boredom, really. That and the high he got from going a little deeper than everyone else. It started with message boards, then escalated to encrypted forums, invite-only servers, and finally, inevitably, the dark web. He'd seen the stories. Red rooms, hitman services, trafficking auctions. Most of it was garbage, fakes meant to lure idiots into handing over Bitcoin. But every now and then, something real slipped through. Something strange. Something wrong. That's when he found the listing. It was posted in a tucked-away corner of a Tor-based marketplace called Silk Grave, a sleazy digital souk that sold everything from counterfeit IDs to untraceable weapons. But this listing wasn't in the usual categories. It was under a section simply called Desires. The title was what caught his eye. Custom Silicone Companions. Hyper-realistic human dolls made to order. She won't blink unless you ask her to. The post was filled with glossy photos, mannequin-like faces with hollow eyes, flawless silicone skin, perfectly molded lips, soft, synthetic hair, joints designed for flexibility. They looked like expensive sex dolls, ones you'd expect from a high-end Tokyo showroom, but something felt off. The eyes weren't glassy or artificial. They were too lifelike. The kind of detail you didn't just sculpt, you had to replicate or steal. Below the images was a short video clip. No face, no talking, just a gloved hand adjusting the jaw of one of the dolls as it sat limp in a wooden chair. The doll's head lolled gently, a blink, then another. The camera zoomed in, and Brandon swore he saw a tear slipping from the corner of its eye. He replayed it 5 times. Was it animatronic? Some kind of experimental AI body? The seller's name didn't help either. Just user, the dollmaker 88. Rating, 5.0, 18 reviews. Real skin texture, real warmth, real silence. Brandon scrolled through the reviews. Delivery took 3 weeks. Packaging was discreet. The product is better than advertised. She's perfect. User count cadence. Expensive, yes. But if you're serious about your collection, you can't do better. Hair was real. I swear it smelled like shampoo. Borshek thought it was a scam. Then the crate came. I haven't slept right since, not a complaint. Bone carver. He stared at the order button for a full 5 minutes. The price was 1.8 BTC, about $120,000 in today's market, which meant two things. One, this wasn't for casual buyers. Two, someone had paid that 18 times if the reviews were to be believed. He should have closed the browser. He should have shut off his VPN and gone to bed. But Brandon Keller was curious. He didn't have that kind of Bitcoin just lying around, but he'd invested years ago, back when it was cheap. And somewhere on a cold wallet in his desk drawer sat the digital keys to just over 2 BTC. He justified it to himself the way addicts do. It's research, just to see if it's real. If it's fake, I'll file a claim. If it's legit, I'll report it. I'll do the right thing. Eventually. The order form was minimal. No names, just a drop address, preferred delivery window, and customization notes. Brandon typed, lifelike. Blonde hair, green eyes, 5 feet 5 inches, slim build, no speech functionality, responsive blinking, freckles. He hit send. Confirmation came through. Order received. Crate delivery, ETA, 2 to 3 weeks. That was it. The first week passed with no updates. Brandon checked the marketplace every day. Then, on the 9th day, the seller's page disappeared. Not deactivated, scrubbed, like it had never been there. His heart pounded. Was it a con? A massive scam? Then the emails started. They weren't from the Silk Grave site. They came through a PGP encrypted email address tied to his purchase alias, bkshadow56@protonmail.com. Subject, preparing your companion. She's coming along beautifully, 1 more week. Be sure your location is secure and private. The email included a time-stamped photo. The same doll from the listing. Same green eyes. This time she was lying on a surgical table, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He zoomed in. Was that moisture on her eyelashes? Brandon started sleeping with the lights on. He jumped at every delivery truck, every knock on the door. He'd begun to dream about the doll. Sometimes she was just standing in his hallway, silent. Other times she was talking in a voice that wasn't hers. By the 14th day, he considered reporting it. He even drafted an anonymous tip to the FBI, detailing what he'd found. But he didn't send it. Not yet. Then the crate arrived. It came early in the morning, 6:02 a.m. Brandon was brushing his teeth when the rumble of a diesel engine echoed outside his apartment. He peered through the blinds. An unmarked white box truck idled at the curb. A man in a gray jumpsuit, no logo, used a dolly to wheel a large, coffin-sized wooden crate to Brandon's doorstep. By the time Brandon got to the door, the truck was already pulling away. There was no invoice, no receipt, just a black stencil on the crate's front, DM88. He dragged it inside, his hands shaking. The wood was heavy, stained, screwed shut with industrial bolts. He grabbed his cordless drill and knelt beside it. He hesitated for one breath, then began to unscrew. 1 bolt, 2, 3, 4. The crate creaked open. Inside, wrapped in a plastic sheath, was the doll. Blonde, freckled, green-eyed, exactly as requested. Her skin looked real. Too real. There was no synthetic texture, no visible seams. Her chest didn't rise or fall, but her lips were parted slightly, as if she'd been caught mid-breath. He peeled back the plastic. That's when he saw the stitching. Along the left thigh, the right shoulder, a faint seam tracing her back like a scar. Brandon reached out and touched the skin. It was warm, Not warm like room temperature, warm like blood. He recoiled. "What the hell?" The doll's eyes opened. She blinked. Once. Twice. Brandon staggered back, dropping the plastic cover. His heart slammed against his ribs. The doll turned her head toward him, slow, unsteady. Her lips moved slightly. No sound. Just breathe. Labored. Strangled. Then tears welled in her eyes. She was alive. Brandon didn't sleep that night. He wrapped her in a blanket and laid her gently on the couch. She didn't fight, didn't speak, just stared. Occasionally blinked, occasionally trembled. He tried asking her questions. "What's your name? Do you understand me? Can you tell me what they did to you?" No answers, just hollow mechanical motions. He examined her more closely. Beneath the stitching were injection ports. Needle marks, maybe? Her fingertips were pruned, as if she'd been submerged in water for too long. Her eyes were unfocused, like she was barely conscious. He checked for a wallet, tags, anything. Nothing. She had been scrubbed clean. A blank slate. A product. He thought about calling the police, then stopped. What would I say? That I bought a woman on the dark web and she's not a doll? They'd arrest him on the spot. He sat on the floor, staring at her. He'd crossed a line. He didn't just stumble into something. He'd participated. She was breathing shallowly, still trembling, still silent. Brandon reached for his phone. Maybe there was another way out of this. Brandon didn't move from the floor for hours. He just sat there, watching her. The girl, the doll, was curled into herself now, lying sideways on the couch like a discarded mannequin. But her eyes still fluttered occasionally. She blinked when the lights flickered. She flinched when he moved too fast. She was alive, and whoever made her had made her into this. The guilt was beginning to rot him from the inside. He'd bought this. He clicked the button, transferred the Bitcoin, gave a drop address. He paid for her like she was a piece of tech, just another curiosity for his late-night obsession. Only now she was in his apartment, breathing, staring, suffering. He stood up, shaky. I need to call someone." The words came out uselessly. Even if he did call, what could he say? "Hi, yes. I bought a human trafficking victim on the dark web by accident. Could you come help?" Number that wasn't going to fly. The police would treat him like the buyer he was. They wouldn't see confusion or regret. They'd see a perpetrator. He paced the apartment, trying to think. Was there a way to undo this? Return her? Alert someone without tying it to himself? His phone buzzed. An email. Sender, unknown. Encrypted address. Subject, how is your new companion? You're treating her gently, yes? They bruise if you're rough, but they're very obedient once the injections wear off. You'll find she doesn't talk much. None of them do. Silence is part of the craft. Remember, do not expose her to sunlight for long durations. Keep her hydrated. Avoid public places. Enjoy. Attached was a second image, not of her, but of him, taken through his window, sitting on the floor. His blood ran cold. They were watching. Brandon locked all the doors. He pulled the blinds shut, turned off his Wi-Fi, unplugged every camera and speaker in the apartment. He didn't feel safe, not even alone. The girl was starting to stir. Small movements, her eyes darting to objects. Her hand twitched once, twice. He approached slowly, crouching near the couch. "Hey," he whispered, It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. He held up a glass of water. "Do you want this?" A pause, then a nod, barely perceptible. He brought it to her lips, tilted, carefully. She sipped it. Shaky gulps. Water spilled down her chin. Her mouth opened as if to speak. Nothing came out but a rasping cough. He grabbed his phone again and searched dark web forums. There had to be answers. Someone else must have seen something like this. He posted anonymously in a now dead thread. What happens if your doll is alive? No replies, but a private message came in seconds later. User, Hollow Kid. Message. You bought from DM88? You need to destroy everything. The crate, the email trail, your devices. They find out you're talking and you're next. Brandon messaged back instantly. Who are they? Not just traffickers, they're artists. They believe they're preserving people. There's a whole network, surgeons, chemists, even tech guys. They don't just kidnap, they transform. You ever heard of plastination? Look it up. You think you saved her? You didn't, you just took her out of the freezer too early. Brandon did look it up. Plastination, a preservation process that replaces water and fat in the body with plastic polymers, preventing decay and creating permanent specimens, used in anatomy exhibits, educational, clinical, and now recreational. His stomach turned. They weren't making dolls. They were preserving people, victims frozen in time, made compliant with drugs and surgeries, reshaped to be companions. He glanced back at the girl. She was more alert now, eyes fixed on him, still not speaking. He knelt beside her again. What's your name? He asked softly. Silence. He reached for her arm, then stopped. He didn't want to touch her like a thing. He wanted to help. Somehow. She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly raised her hand. Her finger dragged across the cushion. A trembling gesture. She traced letters in the dust. L-I-A, Leah. Her name was Leah. The next 3 days were a blur. He cleaned her wounds, gave her food, soft stuff she could swallow easily. She slept in his bed. He crashed on the couch. She still didn't talk, but she watched. She understood. The longer she was out of that crate, the more awareness she regained. On the third night, she scribbled something in a notebook. There were others. Brandon froze. Where? Basement. Cold. Underground. Screaming. He didn't press her. She seemed panicked, like she was reliving it. Her hands shook so hard the pen dropped. That night, she had a nightmare. She screamed in her sleep, high-pitched and guttural, not like a normal voice. Like her vocal cords had been damaged, shredded. He stayed up, watching over her, watching the door. He didn't feel safe anymore. And then the power went out. It was 2:14 a.m. Brandon had just refilled Leah's water when the apartment went black. The fridge shut off. The heater died. All the lights snapped out. He went to the window. Streetlights. Dark. The whole block was out. Then a hum. A small, almost unnoticeable buzz. The sound of backup power. Coming from outside. He peeked through the curtain. A black van sat across the street. No markings. No plates. A figure stood near it, staring up at his apartment, dressed in black, face in shadow. Brandon backed away from the window. He grabbed Leah's hand. We have to go. Now. He didn't own a gun. Closest thing he had was a tire iron and a bottle of pepper spray. He stuffed a backpack with clothes, his cold wallet, the hard drive, and whatever cash he had. Leah wore one of his hoodies, baggy enough to hide her frail frame. They crept down the back stairwell of the building, avoiding windows. The emergency lights flickered as they passed. Leah clung to the railing, shaky but determined. Outside, the air was cold. A low fog hugged the ground. They made it to Brandon's car. a dusty gray Civic parked 3 blocks away. Just as he reached for the door handle, a sound behind them. Footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. "Run!" he shouted. Leah stumbled, but Brandon grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. They dove into the car just as a shape came rushing from the shadows. Black clothes, white mask. Brandon slammed the door and turned the key. Nothing. He tried again. The engine clicked. Refused. 3rd time. It roared to life. They tore down the street as the figure ran after them, fading into the mist. They drove for hours, heading out of the city. Brandon didn't know where they were going, only that they needed to disappear. He found a cheap motel off a rural highway, paid in cash, no names, no questions. Inside the dim room, Leah sat on the bed breathing hard, clutching the blanket like it was a shield. Brandon sat on the floor. He finally understood what he was up against. This wasn't just a one-off horror. He'd stumbled into something massive, systemic, hidden under layers of encryption and silence. He hadn't bought a doll. He'd stolen from monsters, and they wanted her back. The motel was called the Pine Glen, and it reeked of bleach and mildew. Cigarette burns peppered the furniture. The lamp didn't have a bulb, and that suited Brandon just fine. The seedier, the better. They needed a place no one would think to look. He shoved a chair against the door, hung a towel over the peephole, and unplugged the room's landline. Paranoia had wrapped its cold fingers around his throat and wasn't letting go. Leah sat in the corner, knees tucked up to her chest. Her green eyes flickered to him now and then, still not speaking, still not smiling. But she watched, and she understood more than she let on. Brandon knew this was only a temporary pause. He'd taken something from people who didn't operate in laws and courts. People who trafficked in silence and shadows. He was a target now, and so was she. The next morning, Brandon drove to the only person he thought might understand any of this. His name was Tomas Blaine. A former cybersecurity engineer turned whistleblower turned recluse. Brandon had interviewed him once for a college paper. Blaine had uncovered parts of the infamous Onyx Protocol, a dark web trafficking system that got a few headlines before being buried under scandals no one wanted to dig too deeply into. He lived in the woods near Red Hook, New York, in a cluttered cabin buried in trees. Getting there meant leaving paved roads behind, dodging potholes and deer for 20 miles. Brandon pulled into the gravel driveway just before dusk. The windows were blacked out. The mailbox was duct-taped shut. A camera, barely visible under a fake birdhouse, tracked his car as it rolled to a stop. He knocked. No answer. "Tomas," he said loud enough to carry. "It's Brandon Keller. We talked about the protocol stuff years ago. I need help." Still silence. Brandon added, "It's about the doll maker. M88. Cow." Then the door opened. Tomas hadn't aged well, his beard was wild, his glasses cracked at the edge. He looked like someone who didn't trust light bulbs. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, glancing past Brandon to the woods. "Not with her." Brandon's heart jumped. "You know? I know of her. I've seen the listings. DM88 isn't one person. It's a title, passed down like a sick crown. It started as art, became a market." Brandon gestured to the car, where Leah sat curled in the back seat. "She's alive, not a doll. They did something to her, preserved her like an exhibit, kept her sedated. She remembers other victims." Tomas nodded grimly. "Of course she does. They don't always erase everything. Some memories cling like fungus." Brandon followed him inside. Tomas's cabin was lined with books and hard drives, strings of red yarn pinned yellowing printouts to the walls, forum posts, screenshots, maps. It looked like a serial killer's lair, but Brandon recognized the pattern: obsessive research, the same obsession that had once driven him. "Tell me everything," Brandon said. Tomas poured coffee and began. The dollmaker operation is a hybrid, part performance art, part human trafficking, part experimental medicine. It started as a fringe movement in Eastern Europe, underground plastic surgeons and rogue artists working with cadavers. They believed in immortal beauty, preserving the perfect human form as objects, not people. They called them living dolls. At first they used bodies, corpses, but that wasn't enough. They wanted emotion, tears, the illusion of life. That's when the first real victims started showing up. Young, vulnerable, often trafficked. They inject them with a cocktail, paralytics, hallucinogens, hormones, then surgically alter them, joints softened, skin chemically treated, internal organs weakened, but kept functional. They're trained into silence, conditioned to perform compliance. The ones that don't take, they're discarded, buried, or sold off to red rooms. The ones that do become part of what they call the collection. Brandon's stomach turned. "And how big is it?" Tomas shrugged. "No one knows. The collection moves constantly, hidden beneath fake clinics, backroom art galleries, sometimes even underground museums for sick elites. Some of them are mobile, like shipping containers converted into display rooms." He handed Brandon a photo. It showed a room lined with glass cases. Inside each one stood a doll, all inhumanly still. One had her hands posed in prayer, another kneeling like a geisha, all beautiful, all broken. Brandon looked away. "I think I found where they keep them," Tomas said, lowering his voice. "There's chatter on a darknet hub called Eidolon Market, hidden under layers of access. DM88 routes, buyers there, using encrypted invites. I've cracked part of the key." Brandon tensed. "Where is it?" "A building outside Allentown, Pennsylvania. Old textile factory. Gutted and rebuilt underground. No signage. Supposed to be just a warehouse. But power usage, satellite images. Something's happening under there." Leah had crept to the doorway of the cabin now, listening. Brandon stood. "Then that's where we go." Tomas frowned. "You don't get it. These people don't call the cops. They are the cops in places like that. Money talks. Bullets do the rest." "I don't care," Brandon said. "There are others down there. If Leah got out, they can too." Tomas studied him for a long time. "Then you'll need more than righteous anger." They planned for 2 days. Tomas provided surveillance gear, jammers, and burner phones. He gave Brandon an old .38 revolver and taught him how to check the chamber. They tracked power cycles and delivery patterns around the Allentown facility. Every third night, a large transport arrived just after 2 a.m. Always the same truck. Always the same loading bay. Tomas hacked a parking pass. Brandon rewired his license plate. They'd go in that night. Before leaving, Brandon sat with Leah one more time. She held the notebook in her lap. Her hands still trembled. "You don't have to come," he said. She wrote slowly. "I do." He nodded. He wasn't going to stop her. She pointed to the word she'd written, then underlined it. The building loomed like a mausoleum. No signage, no windows, just gray, concrete, and rusted steel under moonless skies. The parking lot was half empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed near the entrance, but no one stood watch. They waited in the back of the Civic, engine off, adrenaline like acid in Brandon's veins. At 2:04 a.m., the truck pulled in. Perfect. Tomas disabled the gate camera feed from his laptop. Brandon drove slowly into the shadow of the truck, parked beside its blind spot. "Go time," Tomas whispered. Inside, the building stank of industrial solvents and metal. A freight elevator took them 2 floors underground. Then came the hallway. It wasn't just a warehouse. It was a gallery. Brandon's breath hitched. Glass chambers lined both walls. Inside each one was a person. A girl with pale skin and raven-black hair, mouth sewn shut. A boy with delicate features, posed in a ballerina stance, fingers locked in place with thin wires. An older woman, eyes wide with terror but utterly still, preserved in some kind of chemical stasis. Dozens of them. Leah stood between 2 chambers, staring, her hands clenched into fists. Brandon whispered, "We're getting them out." Behind them, something hissed. A door. Opening. Footsteps. A tall man in white gloves and a black apron stepped into view. His face was obscured by a breathing mask. He didn't startle. He smiled. "Well," he said, voice muffled but elegant, "you must be the buyer with regrets." Brandon raised the revolver. The man didn't flinch. "I suppose you've come for the rest of the merchandise," he continued. "How sweet. But this collection is not yet complete." Brandon fired. The glass behind the man shattered, but the man had already moved. Alarms blared. Leah screamed. Then the room went red. The alarm shrieked like a dying animal, long grating pulses of red, flashing light slicing through the hallway. Brandon grabbed Leah's hand and ran. Behind them, the masked curator, the one with the gloves and the calm, sterile voice, walked with an unhurried precision as if he had all the time in the world. But others were coming now. Footsteps thundered in from the far corridor, voices barking clipped orders in languages Brandon couldn't place. They turned a corner and found a service stairwell. Brandon kicked it open, heart hammering, the echo of boots behind him. Down. There had to be a lower level, and if this level was the collection, then what was beneath it? The stairs twisted deep into concrete guts. Blood-red emergency lighting streaked the walls. Brandon counted 4 landings before they reached a heavy steel door with a handprint scanner beside it. A small camera blinked to life above them. Brandon shot it. The screen shattered in sparks. The door groaned. It opened. The harvest floor. That's what the stenciled sign said. Faded white letters on gray steel, half scraped off. It was colder here. Colder and quieter. The walls were no longer industrial. Now they were tiled. White, sterile, surgical. The corridor split into 2 halls, one marked preparation and the other staging. Brandon looked to Leah. Her eyes were locked ahead, wide and glassy. She pointed. Preparation. They went that way. What they found was worse than either had imagined. The preparation rooms were makeshift operating theaters, cramped and soulless, draped in plastic sheeting like a slaughterhouse. Metal tables lined the walls, each holding tools that looked halfway between surgical instruments and art supplies. Bone scrapers, wire threaders, syringes the size of forearms, vats filled with translucent gel. Some of the tables weren't empty. In one room, a girl lay strapped down, her face frozen mid-sob. A tube ran from her neck into a humming machine. Her eyes followed Brandon as he entered. She was awake, sedated, but aware. Leah rushed to her side. The girl tried to speak, but only choked on the breathing mask. Brandon grabbed a scalpel and started cutting her restraints. We're getting you out." More doors lined the hall. He pushed into the next. 6 glass tanks filled the room, each one a vertical chamber filled with a glowing blue fluid. Inside floated bodies. Some were in the early stages, eyes closed, limbs suspended in a fetal pose. Others were fully posed, arms bent, fingers curled just so, eyes forced open with surgical retractors. One looked like a ballerina, another a boy with a painted clown smile. None of them moved. A monitor nearby pulsed with data. Subject, L11. A reverie. Status, complete. Stasis, initiated. Brandon felt bile rise in his throat. Jesus Christ, they're preserving them alive. Leah stood at one of the tanks, staring at the girl inside. They had the same eyes, same bone structure. She reached up and pressed her palm to the glass. The girl didn't blink. Leah's shoulders shook. She scrawled a single word in the dust on the glass. "Sister." Brandon whispered, "She's in stasis. There might be a way to wake her." But the terminal showed something else. Subject, L11, a heart rate, flatline. Leah fell to her knees. The next room was staging. Here, the dolls were displayed for final inspection. Plastic curtains formed aisles. At the end of each, an operating gurney with a posed body, perfectly manicured, dressed and labeled with handwritten cards. Brandon read one. Model, DM88-T06. Name, Luna. Age, estimated 13. Disposition, passive. Treatment, complete. There was a camera above each one, live streaming to someone, somewhere. He smashed the closest lens with the butt of the revolver. One by one, he moved down the aisle, cutting cords, wrecking monitors, destroying everything he could. Leah followed, silent but furious. The fear in her had hardened into something colder now, something deadly. Behind a curtain, they found the man again, the curator in black gloves. This time, he wasn't smiling. He held a scalpel in one hand, a syringe in the other. "Such waste," he sighed. "You came here thinking this was some rescue mission, a crusade. But you're not a hero, Mr. Keller. You're an invader. You broke into a sacred space." Brandon raised the revolver. The curator dropped the syringe, raised both hands. "I was like you once, curious, naive. I thought they were monsters too, but then I saw the truth. This is preservation, legacy, a way to transcend decay. They die either way, Brandon. Why not make them eternal?" Brandon's finger curled on the trigger. Then Leah stepped forward. The knife she carried now, stolen from the prep room, flashed once in the red light. The curator gasped, then fell. The sirens returned. They had minutes, maybe less. Brandon grabbed a nearby key ring, unlocking a row of restraints on the staging tables. A few of the dolls flinched. One opened her eyes, blinking slowly. Another tried to speak, her tongue clearly removed. Brandon didn't stop. He and Leah unhooked IVs, freed wrists, whispered promises. "You're safe. We're getting you out." Some didn't respond. Some couldn't. But a handful moved. That was enough. They led 4 survivors, 2 women, 1 child, 1 teen boy, through the stairwell and back to the collection floor. Tomas's voice buzzed in Brandon's earpiece. "Front hallway's clear. I looped the camera feeds for 90 seconds. Move now or you're screwed." They ran. The elevators were down, but the freight lift still worked. The hum of gears as it ascended was the longest minute of Brandon's life. Then, ding. They were back in the truck bay. Tomas had already hacked the exit. The Civic screeched out of the garage like a bullet from a gun. Back at the cabin, Tomas had prepped a triage space in his basement. He treated wounds, administered fluids, checked vitals. The survivors barely spoke. They didn't have to. Their presence was proof. Brandon looked at Leah, who stood in the corner clutching a photo she had taken from one of the folders inside the facility. It showed her, and her sister, before the transformation. Later that night, Tomas handed Brandon a USB stick. "What's this?" "Everything I copied from their servers, schedules, names, buyers, procedures, shipping routes, every damn receipt." Brandon held it like it was a bomb. "This could bring them down." Tomas nodded. "If you go public with this, they'll come for you. It won't be a masked curator next time. It'll be someone worse. You ready for that?" Brandon looked at Leah, then at the freed survivors, now sleeping in the safety of blankets and warm air. He slid the USB into his pocket. "Let them come." The footage went live at 3:17 a.m. Brandon uploaded the video and the data dump through layers of VPNs and private networks. Every image, every file, every name. He sent it to dozens of outlets, mainstream and fringe, Reddit, Signal groups, leaked it to whistleblower networks, backed it up on cold storage, then buried it in the woods behind Tomas's cabin. The truth wasn't just out. It was uncontainable. Within hours, the darknet forums he had monitored for weeks began to go dark. Eidolon Market shut down. DM88's listings vanished like smoke in the wind. Users began wiping accounts, posting cryptic farewells. And then, one by one, they started dying. The first was a Dutch businessman in Berlin. Heart attack. No witnesses. Then, a surgeon in Prague. Suicide, allegedly. A high-profile art dealer in Manhattan was found strangled with a silk scarf. No signs of forced entry. Each death mirrored someone listed in Tomas's USB drive. Buyers, distributors, architects of the collection. Somebody was cleaning house. Brandon watched the body count climb with numb horror. He hadn't just exposed a network, he'd triggered a war. The media picked up the story 2 days later. A leaked video showed a fragment of the facility. Dolls in glass coffins, the sterile prep rooms, the horror frozen in time. The world watched. Outrage poured in, protests, investigations, condemnations, but no arrests. Not one. The names were scrubbed, redacted, or buried under bureaucracy. The building in Allentown was burned to the ground less than a week later. Arson. No suspects. No survivors found. Brandon knew what that meant. They'd erased the trail again. Leah stayed quiet through it all. She barely ate, barely slept. But one night, she stood over the fire pit behind Tomas's cabin, watching the USB melt in the flames. "No backups," she whispered. Brandon didn't stop her. She had her reasons. They were hers to keep. Tomas disappeared a few days later. Left a note, a box of burner phones, and half a tank of gas in the Civic. No goodbye, just, they're still out there, and they always will be. Brandon understood. The people behind the doll maker weren't just traffickers. They were collectors of power, influence, obsession, the kind of people who could kill the story without lifting a finger and then make it disappear entirely. They weren't scared of bullets, they were scared of light. So Brandon stayed loud. He went on podcasts, talked to any journalist who'd listen, built a quiet network of survivors, refugee channels for the ones who slipped through the cracks. He didn't use his real name anymore, but the message remained. They're not untouchable. One night months later, Brandon returned to the cabin. Leah had moved into the basement. She spent most days painting. She didn't draw the dolls anymore. Now she painted doors, hundreds of them, black doors, red doors, steel ones, wooden ones, all locked, all in darkness. Do you know what they are? she asked once. Brandon shook his head. They're not just memories, she said. They're rooms, and there are more, so many more. He looked at one canvas, where a single sliver of light peeked out from beneath a rusted door. What's behind this one? He asked. She smiled for the first time in months. Not them. That winter, Brandon got an encrypted email. No sender, no subject, just a string of numbers and a photo attachment. The image showed another collection, different location, new models, the same red lighting. Beneath it, coordinates, somewhere in Brazil. Brandon stared at the screen for a long time, then shut the laptop. He walked outside. Snow drifted across the trees. In the distance, a single figure stood near the tree line, motionless, watching. Then it turned and vanished into the woods. He wasn't sure if it was real. He wasn't sure it mattered. They would never stop. But neither would he. Epilogue, 2 years later. Somewhere in Romania, a girl named Tasha is sold to a man with soft hands and cold eyes. She's taken to an estate with no windows. But in the night, a door creaks open, and someone whispers, "We're getting you out."